Okay, it's all good. All right, we have as well guests joining us here, and a perfect time for us to step in the community. Michael Romero steps in. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
How are you today, sir?
Real well.
Well, good. Michael steps in and making a campaign swing. Is that a good way to put it?
This will be the fourth time in Clovis for me.
Fourth time in this part of the
In
state.
about the last 5 months. Correct.
Yes. So when you decided to run for Congress, you decided to seek the opportunity to be through the nomination process. How hard is it to get in when you got in? Is it hard because of timing?
Not really. We started out early, and it's been a lot of work, but it's been simple in the sense as to getting it done. A lot of help from other folks. One in particular, Carolyn Spence here, is helping us a lot in Curry County. I wish I could find more of her throughout the 3rd District of Northern New Mexico. And it would make it a lot easier for us.
Well, in a lot of different ways. I know, Carolyn's a regular guest on our program, of course, because of her activity with the High Plains Patriots. But in the first place, she's just one of those very active people.
Very much so.
People that are always out there seeing a need and doing something to solve it. I love that. Now, you're going to be in town for a gathering at Carolyn's, is that right?
That's this evening around 6 p.m. at her residence.
Mhm.
And we're also going to be at one of the other locations for a meet and greet also, and that'll be at one of the military type.
American Legion, that's
I'm
right.
sorry, yeah, I couldn't remember it.
I want to say it's the American Legion on West 7th.
I believe, yeah, there's 3
Six.
locations here in Clovis.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that'll be the one, and that'll be from noon to 2 p.m.
And
Excellent.
then Carolyn's to 4 to 6.
And then Carolyn, you said 4 to 6?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now, when you decide to run, Michael, there's obviously something that always trips someone's trigger, whether it's funding, whether it's spending, whether it's children and education, whatever it is that's the heart and passion of their reason to run. Is there one single thing for you, or is it much more than that?
It's one main thing, but it encompasses everything else. And to me, it's the founding of our nation and obedience and following of our Constitution, which is the law of the land. And recently, over the last 30, 40 years, probably 60, 70, the progressives have gotten hold of our politics and trying to convince people to think their way in changing it and not following the Constitution as it was written and as it was meant. They try to change it on a whim, and there's mechanisms in the Constitution itself, but it's a long, drawn-out process for a reason, because things have to be in place that are steadfast and in stone to make it work over a period of time. So just to change it on the whim, as currently some politicians are trying to do or trying to enforce, will not work. We need to go back to our founding and our Constitution. Then it works for everyone, not just one individual.
It seems like the Constitution is limiting some politicians more than it's setting the path for others.
It was designed that way. It was designed that it would not allow one person to run roughshod over everyone else. So at one point, as it was set, the presidents only served 1 to 2 terms.
Mhm.
And they never seeked a 3rd term until Roosevelt came along and changed that whole dynamic. But what happened is that even though he was mostly loved, etc., most people in charge and the population in the United States realized that we need to limit them to 2 terms. So that was changed by the process of the Constitution and legally done so. So in turn, to me, a representative or senator has no business being in DC for 30, 40 years. That also needs to be limited. And there's arguments on both sides, but in my opinion, as was designed initially, it was a service to our nation, not a career. And they've turned it into a career, and they feel they're in charge and they know best. Well, give someone else a turn and let them do so.
You know what, this is either a great idea or a very bad idea. I guess most ideas fall into that. I have a good friend who says, in the case of the president, everyone's name needs to go in the hat. One name needs to be drawn, and they lose for the next 4 years. They lose their life. They lose the ability to operate their business if they're a business person, or to go to the regular job that they do, because there's a higher calling. The nation has called them to go and serve. And I got to tell you, if the person that we had as president had no political ties, no owing to get to the position, I have a funny feeling the result would be totally different.
Well, everybody talks bad about Trump, and I don't agree with everything he says either, but he owes nothing to no one.
Right.
And that's why he's had this big following. I don't know if he'll come out on top, but the career politicians have not done a good job. And that needs to change. And there's one simple way of doing so. At one time, if we all know our history, the senators for each state were appointed by the House of Representatives of each state.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings the power back closer to the individual. Now it's mob rule, I guess you could say, elects our senators, and it doesn't work that well. So if they were to bring it back and abolish, if I'm correct, the 17th Amendment, it would go back to the states, which would, our 10th Amendment has it that most of the powers belong to the states. The powers enumerated to the federal government are few, and it should be that way.
It's fascinating how important is the vote of one. And I got this note and I hang on to it. We find many applications for it. From the Curry County Board of Elections back in 2012. Does vote count? Does your vote count? And talk about how important it is. We sometimes forget. One vote gave a man control of all of England, Oliver Cromwell. One vote caused Charles I of England to be executed. One vote. One vote gave America the English language instead of German.
German, that's correct.
How interesting is that? 1776, one vote. 1845, one vote brought Texas into the Union. 1868, one vote saved President Andrew Johnson from being removed from office. 1875, one vote changed France from a monarchy to a republic. 1876, one vote gave Rutherford B. Hayes the presidency of the United States. One vote. And people say it doesn't matter. It does matter.
It goes on and on.
One vote gave Adolf Hitler the leadership of the Nazi Party in 1923. Boy, don't you wish you could have changed that one vote?
Just one vote.
One vote could have changed the outcome of a whole century on the earth. And one vote saved selective service just weeks before Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Yes.
So those are some of the just one vote things. But the truth is, I find it fascinating that we live in a time when people kind of feel their vote is washed away. They feel like it doesn't matter. In some ways, our votes here don't matter on our side of the state because we don't reflect the majority in the central part of the state.
Correct.
And that's a sad problem. I find this funny. It always makes me laugh when they go, New Mexico's a swing state. Really? When? Where? How? And the answer is, by the time they really answer those three questions, we're not a swing state. Now that leads to the question, how does someone like yourself decide that there's a need to run in the minority party in a state controlled by the other party?
It's not always been that way. For 60 years, the Democrats ran the House of Representatives in New Mexico, but that's changed recently in this last election.
Sure has.
And I firmly believe as a nation, everything's cyclical. And as a nation, we're finally waking up and realizing we cannot give so much power to one individual or a handful of individuals. We're a republic. We're not a true democracy. True democracy is mob rule. One vote decides our fate. And a republic does not work that way. That's why everybody says we need to get rid of the electoral college. And initially when I was younger, I didn't realize the power of it and why it was designed that way. Well, then, as you were saying that New Mexico is a swing state, well, it can be because of the electoral college and the republic that we live in. So in turn, when it comes down to electing the president, he may win the electoral college, which makes him president, but he may lose the popular vote. And that's where people don't understand why our system works. So it's not mob rule. Mob rule does not work. You talk to the French and the French Revolution and all them heads being lopped off. It was not a pretty situation. It was one person in charge. even though they claim to be a democracy, a true democracy, etc. And they just kept going back and forth. At one point, one group was in charge and they were taking the heads off. At another point, now they were the victims. And so it's not a pretty sight. We've never been to that point. We've had disagreements during our Civil War, and those were settled, and we went on. So we need to keep our and the Constitution survived through all that, and it will survive through this current period of time.
We're visiting this morning with Michael Romero, who is running for congressman for our district. Do you find that Ben Ray Lujan will be a tough opponent because of his performance or because of who he is in our state?
The only way that he will continue to be so, and I think it's waning, is that because of who he is and where he was born and who he was born to. Plain and simple. What I've been told about him as an individual, I have not met him, but he's not very personable, will not talk to people one-on-one, and everything's scripted for him. So, and that's what I understand to be, and I'm sure I will find out more as I go along on this journey.
It seems like we suffer in our part of the state from, I'll use the word withdrawal from political people. We really don't seem to see rare that we see one of our senators here. Senator Heinrich may have been in eastern New Mexico. If so, I've never heard about it. Ever heard about it.
They don't have to.
I know, but there's something wrong with that. That representation, when they don't make a personal showing to see the public.
Well, if we were to eliminate the 17th Amendment and it was up to the state house of New Mexico to elect the senator, do you think he would not come to Clovis to talk to the representative that represents the state and Clovis area, Curry County?
I'm sure would never come here.
Well, he would then, because he would need his vote to become and continue to be senator.
Or there's so many votes in the central part of the state, they still don't have to come here.
Not today's. Today the House is controlled by the Republicans.
I know.
So he would have to do it then.
But somehow there would have to be some Senate action. I mean, the whole world seems to be messed up by Senates everywhere, whether it's state or federal, doesn't it?
Well, it was designed that way. The House was designed to represent the individual and the closeness.
Right.
The Senate was more of a monarchy type setup. They gave them more time, and it was there set up to control the will of the people if it got out of control. So it was all checks and balances. There's three separate, the House and the Senate are one, the presidency, and then our judiciary, our judges. And they were all set to counterbalance each other. At times, one gets out of whack a little bit, or the other ones will draw him back into line again. But the one in our republic with the most power is the House of Representatives. They control the purse strings.
Now, what do you say to someone who says to you, how could you make a difference in a state that is controlled by, I'm going to try to use these, I'm going to try to be careful in my selection of words here, that are sometimes controlled by handouts rather than hand-ups?
We need to educate our populace, our American citizens, as to how our founding was set. And because showing them that, it shows them how it works. These handouts and these, as I've been also told, Santa Claus coming around giving all these freebies, they have to come from somewhere. So when you're taking from someone and giving to someone else, it does not, the ones that are receiving the gift don't have an iron in the fire. So they will always vote themselves, if they even vote, those free gifts. But those eventually run out, because as our Social Security system, at one time it was 6 to 7, 11 people supporting one. Now it's, I think, 3 to 1. Eventually it's going to be almost equal. Well, it's not going to work. It's a Ponzi scheme with good intentions, but politicians got a hold of it and abused and used it to where now they include everybody in it. It was never designed that way. It was only a safety net. It was not a system set up to cover everybody. Well, that's up to the individual. And that's why in America, if you want to be a bum, that's your choice. But if you want to be the president or CEO of a big company, that's also possible. Or even the president of the United States. I mean, Obama proved that. Even though I feel he's misused the office and not used it correctly, he could do so many good things with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't. And I have a feeling, and that's just my personal opinion, why he's doing it. He's got a block on his shoulder. And he just sees America as something bad. Well, America's allowed you to become president of the most powerful country ever that has existed.
It's fascinating to me that the public would choose again and again to elect someone who basically sends the message that doesn't like the direction we're going, doesn't like how we got here, or where we're headed. And yet somehow we're putting them in charge of driving the train to get us there. There's something wrong with that.
This morning when I woke up, I saw a crucifix on my daughter's wall, and it says just hope. And I was thinking, hope is nice, but it has to be with action in a positive way. You just can't sit there and hope something good happens to you, because it won't.
Yeah, hope for change is hard.
Well, it doesn't work. I mean, what are the odds of somebody coming along and just laying a bundle of money in your, I mean, it doesn't happen. And so you have to work at it with hope in mind that things will work out good. But you have to create your own hope, is my opinion.
Well, we're visiting this morning with Michael Romero. Let's take a break and we'll be back with more. Queen of the American Pie, biggest song of the time, no question about it, waiting with the Chevy by the levee. All right, good time for us to step back in the community. And joining us this morning, Michael Romero, who's seeking a nomination to be our representative from this part of the world.
Yes,
from,
sir.
From a large area here in New Mexico.
Very much so. I'm glad it's not the second district, which I think geographically or topographically wise, there it's bigger.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot of mountains, snow, weather, but a lot of nice people.
Absolutely.
That's the best thing I'm enjoying about this. It's a lot of work.
Well, now let's talk about the people, because at the end of the day, you're working to cultivate a group of people who follow your beliefs and your direction toward hopefully a nomination, hopefully the chance to be elected as a representative of this great country, and then the chance to go to Washington and make a difference. What is it about the differences in the people that you find across the state of New Mexico? What makes them tick differently in other parts of the state?
What I believe from different parts of the state is New Mexico is unique in itself. We're called the land of enchantment for a reason. And there's 4 points that meet in New Mexico: Arizona, Colorado, Texas, and Mexico. So this is a little bit of all those different regions and the people that live here. And then northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, my ancestors who settled there were the old Spanish conquistadores that came through there and settled and conquered. They called them that, conquistadores, in Spanish means conquering. And we stayed behind. When the Pueblos revolted and kicked out the government and the priests, well, my ancestors stayed behind and continued living there and farming and raising their families and continuing in our livelihood. So as to our dialect, we are the old Castilian type of Spanish. When the king of Spain spoke and gave the speech for the Olympics back when in Spain, I understood him entirely and without no fumbles or anything. Mm-hmm. So we speak the same dialect and we understood each other real well. So northern New Mexico is very unique. It's very religious, very conservative in our thinking, in raising our families, in our way of life.
I find that interesting too, Michael, in the fact that as a general stroke, the area is broadly conservative, no matter its racial breakdown.
Correct.
It still maintains the conservative values, and yet I find it hard to believe that we were able to elect a Democratic congressman who didn't necessarily reflect those values.
Well, me growing up in northern New Mexico and seeing all that, well, we've always thought of other people as outsiders in the sense that you're not one of us. But I always knew we were all Americans, so that kind of, it didn't fit with my view of us as human beings. Mm-hmm. So, but that's just the way it was. And I think it's because of how secluded we were at one time. My father tells me when he was a teenager, he remembers having to go to Taos to pay their taxes. And it's 18 miles, but it was a 3-day trip at that time.
Sure.
It was one day to get there, one day to take care of business, visit with family, spend the night, and then come back on the third day. Now we get there in 45 minutes to 30 minutes. It's because of technology. So it's opened and changed all that. So I have that connection and that understanding. So I know, but we need to change that. It shouldn't matter who is running for Congress, where you come from or who you are, as long as you're a U.S. citizen and we have the same ideals and uphold the Constitution of the United States. I've taken that oath 3 times myself. Once when I was in the Air Force and signed up, and the second time when I became a deputy in Taos County for the Sheriff's Department. And then my final third one was when I was a police officer in Las Vegas, Nevada for Las Vegas Metro.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it to heart. I swore an oath to it, and me swearing an oath is right up there with everything else I believe in.
Yep.
And we should all be that way to a big extent because it works. We just can't take things on a whim and just sweep them aside and because, it doesn't fit my template today. Well, you need to find a template that fits you throughout your life because it makes your life easier and allows you to live longer and be more effective. See your grandkids, your great grandkids, all that stuff. Because they're our immortality. Because we are all mortals. We born one day and die the next. Nobody's figured it out except for one. And that's the way it works. And northern New Mexico is a mixture of all that, but at one point the federal government came in with ideas and gifts and etc. Well, it'd be a good idea if you became a Democrat. So now I've been running into a lot of young folk and I ask them, because I'm getting petition signatures and I can only have Republicans sign my petition, I ask them what their party affiliation is. Well, I'm Democrat. And I says, well, we can change that and it doesn't hurt and I won't tell anyone, but in turn they tell me that they're Democrat only because their parents signed them on as Democrats.
Right.
And they've been looking at changing to either independent or Republican because they have jobs, they work, they have families, they know what works. And the federal government coming and meddling in our affairs and our business is really screwing things up. And they had no business doing so.
Since the beginning of time, I think the federal government's been messing things up.
Well, centralized government has.
There must have been. Okay, the common defense, I get that part. That's the real heart and soul of why
Correct.
we have a federal government.
Yes.
And if we ever forget that promoting the general welfare, because that never has worked real well. Every time the government gets into social issues, it always seems like we start to wade in quicksand. But interesting. If people want to find out more, Michael, first of all, we'll get back in kind of a small circle to your appearance here in town,
Yes.
where they can come and meet you face to face and ask these questions themselves that I've had the chance to talk with you about. But Michael, is there a place, either Facebook or a web page where folks can find out more about your campaign?
We're on Facebook, and I believe it's follow Michael Romero on Facebook or something to that effect, and I'll come up. I have a political and a personal, and then we're also on the web, and we have Michael Romero for Congress, and they can find me with that. And we've been updating it, and hopefully to have a pay point there, so people, if they're willing to donate to my cause, because it takes money, as everything does.
Sure does.
Just driving here, filling up our vehicle with gas, and making the effort, and driving through the ice and snow out of Albuquerque this morning. So we're doing the legwork, and we're pounding the ground, and getting out and gathering signatures for my petition, and meeting with folk. Like I said earlier, this is my 4th time here, 2nd time with you folks on the radio.
That's right.
And I appreciate it for allowing me to be on the radio and getting my message out. And I'm just a simple, common, down-to-earth man. Common sense, it works. Common sense works. And if you read our Constitution and understand it, it's just common sense. That's what it comes to, the human factor. It's that we tend to, and for whatever reason, just complicate the heck out of our lives and the lives of others without them wanting to. And my job is to uncomplicate it and make it simple again. So in other words, my job is not what I can do for you when I go to Washington, D.C., is what I can do to get the federal government out of your way and mind their own business, and you in turn. As long as you're not impeding on someone else's will or life or harming them as to a criminal action, do what you got to do.
Yep.
And we will mind ours and allow you. The federal government's job is to allow that to occur, not to get into everybody's business and tell them what to do. No
That's
more
right.
nanny states.
Yep.
We need to eliminate that as much as we can, and eventually all of it together.
Well, now Julie, the campaign manager, is sitting behind me. Julie, what time for the meetings today?
We'll be at the American Legion from 12 to 2,
American Legion.
and that's on
posted
7th West.
West 7th from 12 to 2.
And then I guess we're at Carolyn's house. I thought it was from 4 to 6, but I guess it's from 6 to 8.
6 to 8. Is that the official word?
That's what I was told
To see at Carolyn's
at Carolyn's home,
Right. All right.
and that'll be in the evening.
And we'll post it on Facebook just the correct time for Carolyn's.
Excellent. Well, folks, thanks for coming in today. And Julie, thanks for coming in and sitting there just filming. Very boring job for you.
It's not too bad.
Not too bad. All right. As well. Thank you, Michael, and we wish you the best of luck as you go forward in your campaign.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Appreciate you joining Michelle and I here in the community.